When we feel tired, we drink coffee. When we need more focus, we drink coffee. Long day at work, more coffee. Then some coffee just because it's a habit, and maybe some caffeine as a pre-workout. There is a lot more into caffeine than it's commonly known, and if we look at what it actually does to our metabolism, we find out is as dangerous as it can be beneficial. My name is Paolo, and in this video I will explain you everything you need to know about the timing, why tea is very different than coffee, also why some people can fall asleep right after having coffee or caffeine, and I'll give you keys to understanding the actual benefits of caffeine that goes way beyond just enjoying a cup of coffee. First thing we need to understand is that caffeine doesn't actually give us energy at all. It does something way more interesting. It blocks the brain's ability to feel fatigue. And that is a very powerful tool. This mechanism is answer to many questions. Why caffeine works incredibly well when you're just starting with it, why eventually we can build tolerance towards caffeine, and also why people have no problem falling asleep right after having coffee. Caffeine is not adding any energy, it has no calories, and you can definitely observe it yourself when you will notice that just adding more is not giving you infinite boost. Instead, caffeine is interfering with our fatigue system, and if we understand the system properly, we can step in and use it to our benefit. Think of fatigue as a pressure signal for the brain. During the day, body produces a molecule called adenosine, and adenosine gradually builds up and tells our brain that it's time to slow down. Because caffeine and adenosine have a very similar molecular structure, the receptors that are meant for adenosine can be taken by caffeine. Caffeine will bind to these receptors and it will not allow adenosine to enter and send the signal. So the signal from the body is still there, it's just not getting through to the brain. There is no energy created by caffeine. We are just not getting the signal that the fatigue is built to the brain, or this signal is delayed. Because adenosine is still building up, it's accumulating. And when caffeine wears off, that's when the crash happens. Because all that signals that were suppressed just start to trigger the receptors instantly. So the fatigue response later is sudden and more powerful. When we're talking about the intensity of this response, we also need to mention the actual source of the caffeine. Coffee delivers caffeine more rapidly in spikes. However, tea also contains L-theanine. It's an amino acid that is present naturally in tea leaves. It can cross the blood-brain barrier and slow down and smoothen the effects of caffeine. It affects neurotransmitters, modulates dopamine, and also it increases alpha brainwaves. So the overall effect is eventually increase in parasympathetic tone. And therefore the result is more of a calm focus than rapid stimulation. Coffee, because it blocks the adenosine receptors and it stimulates norepinephrine and dopamine, will give you this sharp reaction, sometimes makes you jittery, increases heart rate, and in more sensitive people it can potentially even lead to a mild spike of anxiety. L-theanine will calm down this sympathetic overreaction and it leads to more calm focus. The uptake is a little bit slower and it gives you more stable and smoother stimulation curve, and by that they modulate the high spike of the caffeine. If you are not having it naturally in the tea, then most used ratio is 2:1 theanine to caffeine. So if you have 100 milligrams of caffeine, you take 200 milligrams of theanine. You can think of it like caffeine being the accelerator and the theanine is a steering and gear management, so it kind of directs and spreads out the reaction. But it's important to understand that L-theanine is not cancelling caffeine. It is just modulating the metabolism response to it. When we understand how it actually works and that the caffeine is merely just blocking the fatigue signals, then the timing becomes critical. Instead of using caffeine randomly, we can time it properly through the day, and with the proper strategy, we get only the good stuff, the benefits, without any side effects that we don't want to have. Because of the half time of breakdown of caffeine is between 10 to 12 hours for most people, even though there will be factors as a weight, how much you are already adapted to caffeine, and predisposition as well. It is optimal to stop caffeine intake 10 to 12 hours before bedtime. If we don't do that, whether we feel it or not, it will impact our sleep. There are people who can fall asleep right after having a coffee. However, that doesn't mean that the quality of the sleep they are getting is what it's supposed to be or what it could be. REM and deep sleep are strongly affected by caffeine intake. And if somebody is just chronically fatigued so much that they can still fall asleep even after having a coffee, that doesn't mean it's not affecting them. On the other hand, it is also not recommended to have caffeine as a first thing in the morning. In the morning, we naturally have and we want to have high cortisol. That is what is actually waking us up. But the caffeine intake can suppress this cortisol response, and then there is a crash following in the afternoon. There is plenty of research suggesting that avoiding caffeine first 1 hour to 1.5 hours in the morning is going to prevent this afternoon crash. On the other hand, there is also some evidence suggesting that there is not such a thing happening at all. So the best thing you can do is try it yourself. If you often are feeling fatigue and you are crashing in the afternoon, just try for a week or two, delay your coffee 60-90 minutes, and you will see whether it works for you or not. So if we assume we are delaying the coffee in the morning and we also want to have the coffee latest 10 to 12 hours before bedtime, for most normally functioning individuals, that would leave the open window for caffeine intake between 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. That might seem very limiting, but for optimal practice, this is what all the research and observations are suggesting is the best practice for the caffeine not to interfere with our natural biological processes and circadian rhythms and stable energy levels through the day. Regarding caffeine supplements and tablets, it's important to note that pretty much all pre-workout supplements are caffeine based. They might have some other things in them, but the active substance that is giving you the effect you are looking for is pretty much always just the caffeine. Generally, a safe dose for a healthy adult individual is considered around 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. That will be very individual based on many factors, from size to how much you are actually used to taking caffeine and so on. But to put it into perspective, one espresso has something between 60 to 80 milligrams of caffeine. Standard pour-over coffee might have something between 90 to 150 milligrams of caffeine. But if we look at one scoop of C4, that's 200 milligrams, and C4 Ultimate version is 300 milligrams per dosage. So combining coffee with a pre-workouts and possibly with some other drinks like cola or Red Bull that are also having caffeine, you can easily get over this recommended dosage. The other thing is that many of these drinks are also having added sugar, and that can have fairly strong impact on metabolism, and I don't mean it in a good way. And zero sugar versions of these drinks are not much better either for many other reasons. There is many physiological benefits to having coffee and also tea. The caffeine itself is just one of the compounds, and it's definitely not worth of cutting it completely. We just need to be smart and use it, as I said before, to our benefit. Coffee itself is showing potential to even help with prevention of a type 2 diabetes through glucose regulation. It helps with liver enzymes. It has a couple of B vitamins, manganese, magnesium. It also contains anti-inflammatory polyphenols, which is absolute benefit on its own. As with most things, it's a great tool until it starts to become a crutch, in a sense that we are leaning into it too much and we can't even imagine a day without it. If you really want to know who you are in regards of energy levels and energy spikes through the day, try 1 or 2 weeks without coffee. If you remove coffee and you were a regular user, there is a chance that you will have some kind of withdrawal symptoms, maybe irritability or some mild headaches, but this should all go away within 3 to 4 days. And that itself is showing us that our body might be somewhat dependent on it to a certain degree. Caffeine, in its core, it's temporary modifier of our perception, and that is a fact that we can learn to use properly. Thank you for listening. My name is Paolo. Send this video to 2 people, somebody who you would really like to invite for a coffee, and somebody who you know is an absolute mess without their daily dosage, and let them figure out who is who. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, comment under the video. See you next time.